So today we're going to talk about remote access and what kind of services that we have access to, both with and without VPN here within IDSI, and how that can help us if we happen to need to do something from home or get approval to work from home, how we can do that most effectively. So the first thing we'll run through, I have a document that I will provide out to everyone through SharePoint and through the R drive where I put all these files, that has a little quick reference to all the stuff I'm going to talk about today, so you don't have to worry about jotting down any addresses or anything like that. I'll make this available to everybody. But we're going to start out with some of the basic services. Most you probably already know about webmail. You can get that through there. You can also set up mail on a smartphone or another desktop program. If you want to use Outlook or some other program, you're welcome to do that. We support, of course, Exchange services, which is native to Outlook, and also most smartphones can handle that just fine as well. Sometimes they call it corporate, but it's usually Exchange. And all you generally need for that is your IDSI email address and password. Some of them don't work quite right with just that, and you got to tell it the server name is mail.idsi.com, not just idsi.com. But other than that, it should go through pretty well. We do also support SMTP on port 587 usually, because also the normal 25, because a lot of ISPs will block that for spam reasons. IMAP, which is kind of the next best way of doing email. If you can't do Exchange, you don't want to do webmail, IMAP lets you at least see your folders. You don't get calendar or contact items, but you do get some folders at least in there. And it keeps it in sync with the server as opposed to some other things which won't. So that's a pretty good option. And by what I mean by in sync is it won't pull it off of the server, and it will, if you mark it as red in one place, it'll be red in the other place, as opposed to two totally separate copies, which is what POP3, our next item on the list, does. Where that you can tell it to leave a copy on the server, but by default it's going to download and remove it from the server, which is not the best thing to do, because then we don't have a backup of it, and you won't be able to see it in webmail or Outlook or anywhere else. Once you pulled it off on one machine, it lives on that machine. And whether or not you leave a copy on the server, POP doesn't track who's, if you move it to another folder, it doesn't do folders at all, it's just your inbox. It also won't track when it's been marked as red, or anything else you might do with it. So I really don't recommend POP3. We do support it as a last resort, but in your order of preference is going to be Exchange, webmail, and then IMAP. SMTP, for those that don't know, that's for sending email specifically, and not for receiving at all. So if you end up using IMAP or POP, it'll ask you about the SMTP as well, so it knows how to send out mail, because the other ones are just for checking. So time and expense, of course, just timesheet.idsi.com, also timesheets, just to keep things easy. There's a whole other webinar on that. If you have any questions on that, you can take a look at that, or just give Carrie Cook or I a call, and we can help you out with those questions. So we've got instant messaging, which for the people on IDSI machines, we do Pigeon, which is a nice free software you can use if you like at home as well, and you can set it up completely at home just as it would be at IDSI. The full instructions are in SharePoint on how to do that. There are a number of other programs. If you use a Mac, for example, you can't use Pigeon, but there's a similar one called Adium, or any other number of programs that support XMPP. Sometimes it's called Jabber, but either way, it's the same thing. So any program that does that you can use. If you don't want to use a separate program, we do have a web version of it, web client, just im.idsi.com/japix, and that'll get you in. You log in with your IDSI username and password, and it gets you in just as though you had Pigeon open. So if you're sitting at home, then you're good. There's also mobile clients on there. Again, all you're going to need for the settings for that is to tell it that it's an XMPP or Jabber account, and the domain is im.idsi.com. Username is your regular IDSI username, not your email address, just the username, and your regular IDSI password. Likewise, when you change your IDSI password, don't forget to change it in whatever client you're using if you're not using the web client, because that doesn't update automatically. So next time you log off and back on, it's going to fail because you haven't changed it. So every 6 months when your password changes. We also have SharePoint sites. We have a few Three of them. We have our legacy site that had been set up a while ago. It's just SharePoint.IDSI.com. At one point when we had upgraded, we kind of tried to subdivide it out. Intranet.IDSI.com, which doesn't have a lot of stuff in it yet. Extranet.IDSI.com is the one. So intranet is, neither of them require you to be on the VPN. They're both open. You do have to log in with your IDSI username and password. The one's called intranet because it's designed specifically just for internal stuff. So we're not going to put anything on there that somebody from outside the company will have access to. I will leave that strictly to the extranet site for that. I just realized I wasn't sharing. Sorry about that. So our extranet site might have proposals as we're working with other companies, or projects where we have to work with other companies to get files back and forth and to keep calendaring and all the other things that SharePoint can do. If you're interested in learning more about SharePoint, there's plenty of resources out there, or as always, feel free to ask me and I can give you the rundown on how that works and what it can do for us. The final internet exposed non-VPN service that we have is Subversion. If you're using it, you'll know it already. It's a version control system where you have your typically originally coding project, but you can use it for any set of files. Where we have it set up on our server, so it's something that we have to set up explicitly, and everybody gets a local copy of it, makes their changes locally, and then periodically will commit those back to the main server. Other people will then download all those changes, and if two people have changed the same thing, it'll let you know, and you can pick which one you want. The kind of big disadvantage to it is you don't get the file locking. So if I've got the document open, somebody else goes to open it somewhere else, they have no way of knowing that I have it open. The only way we'll find out is if we both made a change, and when we commit it back in there, it'll say, hey, somebody else already changed it since you got it last, so now there's a conflict and you have to figure out which one you want to keep or merge the two. But you'll be able to get to that through any Subversion client. For Windows, we generally use Tortoise SVN, but you can use any Subversion client, and that's at https svn.isai.com:8443/svn, then / whatever project name we've set up for you. And again, you'll know this, or if there's any questions you can't remember what it is, then just feel free to ask and I'll let you know. So the interesting things that a lot of people don't know about come in with the VPN only services. First off, we have a VPN, for those that didn't know. So what that lets you do is it lets you get basically onto our network from anywhere you have internet access. There are a few issues with some ISPs and routers that we'll talk about a little bit in a few minutes. But it's a great thing. It would be the same as you bringing your computer and plugging it into our network here, even though you're sitting at home or in a hotel or wherever you happen to be at the moment. So the VPN setup instructions can be found in SharePoint. We do have VPN access through Centerville, Pensacola, and Williamsburg. You get access to all the same resources regardless of which one you connect to. So you don't have to connect to Pensacola to get to the P drive, but then Williamsburg to get to the W drive. It acts as though you're sitting in that office, so you have full access to all the IDSI resources from just connecting to one VPN. In fact, you don't really want to connect to two because that can sometimes confuse things. So what we can do from there, we have two options. If you're on your IDSI computer, for example, you've got a laptop, you've taken it home, or on travel with you, you can get right to the file shares. You can go to the R drive or the P drive as you normally do, and it'll all work fine. And you get to the, so if you don't, though, have your IDSI computer at home, you have two options. You can set it up, once you've connected to the VPN, you can set it up so that you can still get to the P drive and the R drive by either going directly to these paths right here or mapping a drive so it actually shows up as the P drive. Either way is fine, and I'll kind of go through that in a short demo here. So that'll go one way. There's a list of advantages and disadvantages I have in this worksheet about that, and we'll go through those in just a second. The alternate way, which is my preferred way, there are a few times when it's not the best, but in general I find this works the best if you're not on your IDSI computer, is to use remote desktop connection. What that does is that lets you over the network connect to your machine as though you were sitting at it locally. So it's as though your keyboard and mouse and monitor that you're looking at remotely had incredibly long wires connected to your machine at the office. There are free programs for doing that. They're built right into Windows with a remote desktop connection. You don't have to install anything from Windows, I think, probably 2000 or so on, certainly XP on. There's a free app from Microsoft for it in the App Store. Linux has a bunch of different apps for it. Your IDSI computer name that you're going to connect to is going to be the office code dash your first initial, last name. So, for example, for me, Michael McGill, based in Centerville, it's CEN. Here the office code's down here. CEN dash M McGill. If you're on Windows, that's probably all you'll need is that first part. But this when you add .idsi.local, that makes it a little more robust. It'll work a little more reliably, particularly if you're on a non-Windows machine. You might need that. So it's just good practice to have it in there. So some of the advantages and disadvantages of why you'd want one over the other. Remote desktop, like I said, is very fast for most workloads. If you're doing stuff that doesn't use a lot of full screen animations like a 3D program or some video editor or something like that that's going to have lots of screen changes, then it's going to work great. Office programs like Word, PowerPoint minus transitions, those obviously, because then we're back into the animation territory. PowerPoint, any kind of opening up files and PDFs and stuff like that. PDFs can be a little bit slow depending on the PDF, but they're very workable. It works. It's great. It's very fast and very convenient. Files are going to load really fast, or at least as fast as they do at the office, because it's your office machine that's doing all the work. It's pulling it from its local copy, and all it's sending down to you is the screen of what it looks like, the way of what you've got open, rather than having to send the entire file. So as I said, there's little or no software that has to be installed because it's baked into Windows already. So you can, any kind of business center in a hotel, if you don't even have your computer or you're sitting down at a friend's computer, you won't have to install anything. In those cases, you would have to install configure the VPN, which doesn't require any extra software either, but you would have to go through those steps. So that is somewhat of a hassle in like a business center. You may or may not be able to do that. But you're certainly not going to be able to do file shares there either. So you're kind of stuck with the publicly available resources in that instance. But you're going to be working with the same environment as your desktop because you are literally or your office computer, because you're literally going to be on that computer. So it'll have all of the programs you need and everything like that all there and ready for you. In fact, you can even do this from a mobile device. Again, the VPN setup is a little bit trickier on a mobile device like an iPhone or an Android phone, but it absolutely can be done, and you can do it on a phone or an iPad. The main drawbacks are, like I said, the full screen animation and lots of things with lots of screen activity tend to be a problem just because of performance issues. They work, they don't crash or anything like that. 3D games and stuff like that won't work, but those other things will work just kind of slowly. So rather than seeing a nice smooth animation of something rotating, you might just see lots of jerky animation. And sometimes local printers and things like that and other resources can be difficult to access. You can get to your local drives or a USB drive or something like that. A local smart card reader is not going to work. A lot of smart card software explicitly turns off when you're on remote desktop because they don't want to take the chance of some hacker or something getting into it that way. Printing works most of the time. They have some universal print drivers that are generic enough to work. You don't always get the full features of the printer, but it almost always works. But there are instances where it doesn't work well and you have to load the printer drivers. Those are few and far between, but it is something to be aware of that you might have that problem. It can be worked around though. The file shares are your app is gonna run at full speed. So if you're using, because it's running now on the remote machine, on the machine that you're physically in front of. The downside is, of course, you have to have the app installed. If you're on a friend's machine or something like that, or your home machine where you don't necessarily have the Adobe apps, but you need to edit a video, well, you're going to have to install it locally if you go the file share route. Or same with PowerPoint, or maybe you've got an old version of PowerPoint at home, something like that. You have to make sure that your home version is up to date. The biggest issue that people have when working with it is because you have to take the entire file you're opening and it downloads it to your local machine when you open it. It does it automatically when you double click on it, but it does have to download the entire thing. So once it's open, it's great because it's downloaded, everything's working locally, you can zoom around as fast as you want. It's that initial time of waiting for it to open. And some of the files that we do, most of the time Word files or PowerPoint aren't too bad, but some of the files can be 10, 20, 50 megs, even for those Office documents, and that can get cumbersome to open and save, as it might take a couple minutes to open it. So that's kind of a time sink. The workaround for that would be to copy to local machine, work on it, save it as much as you need locally, then copy it back. The downside to that is, of course, you have to remember to copy it back. If somebody else made a change in the meantime, nobody knows that you're both working on it, and you might overwrite their changes. So there's some hassles certainly with doing that, but it can be done. And obviously another benefit is you're going to have full access to your local printer and all that, because that's all set up on your local machine. You have no problems there. Macs sometimes have problems with the file share too, because they don't support what's called DFS, where we have, if you see up here, we say //IDSI.local, which is a generic thing. If you're in Centerville, it's going to take that and then point you to the Centerville servers. If you're in Williamsburg, it'll point you to Williamsburg, et cetera, et cetera. And VPN will still do that based on which VPN you're connected to, so it's smart enough to do that. The Macs don't work very well with that for some reason. The support is supposed to be there, but it's just kind of flaky, I guess. I haven't had good luck getting it to work reliably or quickly. So you end up having to go to the specific server and share that you want, because they don't support drive mapping. There's no concept of an R drive or a C drive or anything like that on a Mac. So it's doable, but it's a bit more of a hassle. And obviously there's a lot more configuration and troubleshooting that needs to be done when setting it up. It tends to be a one-time thing, and once it's there, it's good, but it does tend to be a little more difficult to set up. So now I will go ahead and show you some remote desktop stuff. So this is the Windows Remote Desktop Connection Client, and there's plenty of options in here, but for the most part, you're probably just going to want to leave these alone. It will default to going full screen if you don't want it to be full screen, or you want it to use multiple monitors. If you have multiple monitors at home, you can support that too. That's in this display tab, but in general, you're just going to hide the options. So first you're going to connect your VPN, and then second you're going to go ahead and connect to the computer. And for the purposes of this, I'll connect to my home machine. It's going to ask you for your username and password. Now it's going to default to your IDSI, or excuse me, to whatever you logged on to your home machine with. So you're more than likely the first time, and it will remember this, but the first time you'll need to use another account. Since I've already logged onto it before, it knows who I am. So I'm going to, hope I typed that correctly. And this should connect to it. When you're connecting, you'll probably get an issue about the certificate because your remote machine is not on the domain. There we go. Alright, so there's my home machine. So now I'm full screen, and this is working off of my home machine right now. So if I go on here, I don't have an R drive because I'm on my home machine, but I have full access to all the resources. So kind of imagine this reversed. Since I'm working from IDSI, you'll be doing this opposite. You'll notice this blue bar up here at the top. You can unpin it if it bothers you, and it'll go away in just a moment. There it goes, until you mouse over the top. But what this does, this controls your connection to the remote machine. You can see right here the connection quality. Minimize it if you want to go back to your local machine that you're working on. And also this X right up here is very important because, as I said, this is like taking your keyboard and mouse and monitor that's in front of you and plugging it into your remote machine. So if I hit this X over here, I will disconnect those things. That doesn't log me off. It doesn't close any files or programs I have open. It doesn't shut down the remote machine. So if I had been working on something and I go ahead and disconnect from this with this button up here, when I come back, so either going back into the office in the example or loading up remote desktop connection again, which I will do now, it will all be exactly as I left it. So that is a handy, whoops. You do have to type your password correctly. There we go. So it's all right there. Alright. So while we're here, I will go ahead and also show the VPN. As I said, the full VPN setup instructions are in the SharePoint system that I will provide a link for. And there will also be a link to the document in SharePoint on the YouTube video that I upload for this. So look for that in the description. Alright. So this is Windows 10. So based on your version of Windows or Mac, obviously the setup instructions are going to vary a bit. And I've already got them set up on here, but we'll go ahead and set up another one. Network settings. Oh, actually, sorry. Here we go. If I right click on here, open network and sharing, we'll go ahead and just set up a new connection to a workplace. How do you create a new connection? Alright. Use my existing connection. So the internet address is just going to be the name of the office, .idsi.com. Name of the office vpn.idsi.com, Centerville VPN, for example. The destination name doesn't matter. I like to call it IDSI Centerville VPN. I'm going to call it 2 because I already have one here. You can have it remember your credentials if you want, whether or not you want to allow other people. Most of the time on a home machine you're not going to want to do this, and these will already be set up on your IDSI laptops, so you don't have to worry about setting those up. Alright, we do that. And on Windows 10, they, for some reason, restrict some of the settings. I'm not sure why, but we should be able to go into the properties for this and set it, but on Windows 10 it just does nothing when you do that. That's a strange bug from Microsoft on that one. There are further instructions for setting things up to kind of optimize it for network traffic, because normally once you connect to the VPN, it'll send all your stuff through it, and you probably only want your IDSI stuff. You wouldn't want your web browsing stuff to go through it, because that would just slow you down more than likely. There are a few other settings we change for Windows 8 and above. We have to tell it a little more specifically what we have. That's good. Oh, require encryption. Again, don't worry about the specifics on this because it'll all be in there. So then once we've got it set up, we can click on the network icon and then go to the VPN we set up. IDSI Centerville VPN. Windows 10, they make you click a couple of times. In Windows 8, you'd have a connect button right there. We hit connect. And you can thank my daughter for the nice bright yellow there. Alright. Okay, so we've connected to the VPN, and you'll notice nothing happened. We didn't get anything that popped up because all it's done is acted as though we've plugged into the local network here. So it doesn't automatically do anything for you, but now we can get to resources. I could, for example, go, I've done this the long way. So now we can go to one of those things I had on there before, like the R drive. And there we go. So now on my home machine, I can get to all my work files here. Although I went into somebody else's user folder. There we go. And that's it. You can stay connected as long as you like. In general, it's best to disconnect, but you don't have to, strictly speaking. And that's it. So does anybody have any questions about remote access, how to use it, what it can be used for, anything I didn't cover?
Oh, I think that was pretty good, Michael.
All right. As always, thank you all for attending. Oh, yeah, Leslie just commented in there. She loves remote desktop. It's actually my primary support. If I can have access to remote desktop, then I use it because it's just great. Oh, and if you're worried about somebody else logging into your machine, by default, it only allows local administrators and the people you explicitly allow to connect to your machine by remote desktop. So and the only people I set up as local administrators are the primary users of that computer. So you're not going to be able to have just anybody in the company connect to your local machine. One other thing I should mention, it probably won't come up because we each have our own machines, but it does kick out the local users when you're connected by a remote desktop. So it'll show on my end here that it's been locked. And some of you might have seen that if I've taken over your machine, because that's my preferred way to do it, unless I need to interact with you or I need you to type in a password or something, because it's just much faster. But you'll see that, oh, it's been locked, remotely by Michael McGill, and that's where that's coming from. That's the remote desktop. So you can't have somebody work on your machine at the office while you're working on it at home. So, all right. Well, thank you all for attending, and I will see you next month.